Good morning, everyone, or I guess good afternoon. Thank you, first of all, Allison, for inviting us to talk a little bit about some concerns that our tribes constantly have is effects to our cultural resources and such. And it's interesting when I was asked to present here is if we would be able to talk a little bit about how road south, something that sounds like it's very important to the Wisconsin environment, especially along our roads, because we have four seasons, right? Winter, is one of the seasons that we enjoy most, but we have to traverse across that. With that said, what I'm going to talk about a little bit about is how road salt actually affects indigenous communities. And you'll see it. I just took a couple slides that we had from other presentations and I put them in here. But one of the things folks don't take into consideration from day to day is that indigenous folks have been here for quite a while. When we talk about our indigenous presence in Wisconsin, we often talk about how we traverse, and then people think, well, they got in canoes and they float all over the river systems to go across our ancestral areas. But we had, just the much ability to walk or traverse across our lands too. And so I highlighted in our presentation 2 points, the past and the present. And Indian trails is what you'll hear historically people talk about or document. And for the Ho-Chunk people, for example, we talk about how long we've been here, residents in our ancestral areas, that we have never been in anywhere else that we know of, that our origin stories puts in a place called Mogasuch. And right there is where it's at. And if you traverse across our ancestral areas, you'll get to a place called Nichate, the large river, what we know of as the Mississippi today. And all these water systems obviously were created to a large degree by the last several glacier episodes. And many oral histories and the stories that we talk about ancestrally allows us to talk about periods of time, these names that we created after we saw these things develop, environmentally and be established in our ancestral areas, where these still are the same areas that we call today. With that said, if we fast forward through, many thousands of years up to what now people refer to as the historic periods, right? The 1600s, where the French first arrived in Green Bay and met none other than my ancestors, the Ho-Chunk people. The 1700s, the British came, and it excited influenced, our region over here. The 1800s, right? When the early Americans came here and now became dominant in the area. And I put that oh my in there. And within the last 300 to 400 years, the transition of the societies of people coming in here was great. But what they found was ancestral peoples here that lived here for thousands of years. And you can see this, many early historians and anthropologists who began to study, the native cultures in here, they soon recognized all the many different aspects of our culture indigenous to this area here, which included none other than trails. And this image here kind of highlights some of the trails of us, ancestrally passing, to and fro across our areas. And so when we talk about Wisconsin, well, of course, we talk about nowadays about, how the railroad system come in here and the ensuing roads. Well, these roads, tended to be placed upon a lot of our indigenous trails in the area. And I'll take, for example, in Wisconsin, the Portage area, very prominent and important area of Wisconsin, right? Where you can take a boat, for example, from, the eastern shorelines all the way up through the Great Lakes and come up to Fox and Portage for a short period, and you flop down into the Wisconsin River and you carry on to the Mississippi water system, the Shed. Well, that's how you get across, this region through water. But a lot of people don't take into account, the many areas in Portage alone. I've circled here on red all the Indian trails that they're referred to by Charlie E. Brown and other anthropologists and people that studied my culture. But I also circled all the villages and all the other different components that's along these trail systems. And so when we talk about, our highway systems and byway systems today, you'll see that when there's studies done there's so much culturally, areas here, but they also refer to it as archaeological resources. So what are along these roadways, right? that we traverse across daily. Well, in times of old, in villages and communities and places of refuge or places that we would traverse across, to and from, and the trade routes even was something really, really big, not only along the water system, but along these trails. A lot of people in Wisconsin do any history study at all, you'll realize that soon that from Prairie du Chien, for example, to Green Bay, they created this military road that basically followed a major artery that we had to get from here to there. But along these trails, you have to understand that we had our lifeways, right? The way we lived, sacred sites and burials and the fauna in Florida that we would harvest along these trail systems there. And more importantly, the water resources along those as well. Like I say here, it's not so much the trail that is so important to recognize. It's what alongside those trails that exist. And now we protect and preserve, those cultural resources, that we have been stripped of, right? We've been pocketed into the reservations or small communities, and the Ho-Chunk Nation is regarded as an at-large tribe, for example. Well, that means that we have pockets of communities that we still have to govern over today. But along those roadsides that we used to travel, freely, well, now we're restricted to, local, state, and federal laws, no different than others. But we oftentimes still go out there and gather. So we have to be very selective now where we gather many of our foods, right? And these pictures here, these images here, you see mahish or milkweed. Certain times a year, we just, crave, certain things, certain times a year. We collect it and bring it back and cook it, right? But one of the things we have to be carried about is the pesticides and the salts and all the different things that come off these vehicles that travel these roads nowadays. So you have to be very selective of where you go harvest this food for us. Another example of how it affects us, the salt. Here's Kingsley Bend over Highway 16 in Adams County, or just east of Wisconsin Dells and to the south. We manage this property, and you'll see this inlet here that's on a state historic site. Here's Highway 16, right? 13 estates down here. But the effigy mounds that are on both sides of the roads, well, those are culturally significant sites for indigenous people. Not only do we use them as mortuary sites where our ancestors are buried, these earthworks were regarded as something that was very significant during the period of time that we need to now protect and preserve. Well, look at how close the highway is to this panther mound, for example, this water spirit mound, right? And to think about all this road debris and the salt that, affects, something that's quite sacred to us, that placement of our ancestors, so they carry on their second journey. Well, this is adversely affecting that site. And here's another image of that. Here's the highway, and you're looking across, the effigy mound system that we take care of. It's called Kingsley Bend. You can look at that. We leave it open to the public there to go there and do what you need to do there, right? But another effect to us is also in our daily life. My daughter here is taking from a spring in close proximity to a road. And you have to be careful, that these springs, that's water is life, they say, right? Without water, none of us on this earth would survive, very long. But along the roadways also you have the collection of our medicines and other plants and the adverse effects that takes place through years and years of all this salt and all these other debris falling upon the trees. Well, it affects our natural resources, environmental resources, but also our cultural resources. And last but not least, not only us, but, the animals around here, right? They come out there and they want to eat that salt and lick that salt, and they're and we in Wisconsin, insurance companies, almost look at those as a nuisance, right? All these deers out there and the high cost, it is to avoid these deers out there. And so in short, though, all of this salt and debris that we find along the roadways, how do we combat that, right? My last slide here, and I'll turn it over to Jeremy here as well. Our nation as a government, and we have the ability to meet government to government with these local municipalities and state highways and these federal highways out there to create documents to say if we have a spring that's so close to the roadway, we're scared that, all these chemicals and the salt is adversely affecting this watershed that it affects something that we still use to this day. Create an MOA where you could avoid that area or lessen the degree of that, right? And in our tribal community awareness. Let's contact our tribal members in these communities and make sure they realize that when you're out there collecting, these foods in the spring or the medicines that you have, this possibility that there could be some contamination along with that too, right? And then practice what we preach, right? Jeremy he works with the highways and roads for his own people, and he knows that we have to do this in our own tribal lands. We have to do this in our own tribal communities because it's pretty hard for us to say, do as I say, but then we don't do it as we do. And so I will leave it at that. I mean, I'll be anxious to hear some questions on the far end of that, and I hope I come across clearly and everybody is kind of understanding how this does affect our culture and our ways of life. So I'll stop sharing. I'll turn it back over to you, and I'll mute my mic.
Thank you, Bill. That was excellent. All right, Jeremy, yeah, you can pull your slides up here and we'll keep moving along. If anyone has questions for Bill, you can start typing those into the chat before you forget them too.
Okay, Allison, are you seeing the screen?
Yep, looks great,
Okay.
Jeremy.
Okay. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeremy Wiesa. I'm the Administrative Coordinator for Menominee County, and I'm also the Highway Commissioner. I started here in 2012, September of 2012, so I've been here for many winters now as the Highway Commissioner. I'm also a member of the Menominee Indian Tribe of Wisconsin, and I'm a descendant of the Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation. Today, I'd like to discuss some of the financial and technical challenges facing Menominee County with respect to reducing salt usage. So Menominee County is located about 45 miles northwest of Green Bay, Wisconsin. Our boundaries are coterminous with the Menominee Indian Reservation. For those of you who don't know, Menominee Indian Reservation is home to the Menominee Indian Tribe of Wisconsin and its 9,000 members. Menominee County is unique in several respects. The county is comprised of only one town by the same name, and the county's 7-member board of supervisors also serves as the governing board for the town. Approximately 85% of the county's population are members of the Menominee tribe. Not surprisingly, the majority of the county board and town board are members or descendants of the Menominee tribe also. Menominee County is the 72nd and smallest county in the state, consisting of about 230,400 acres or 360 square miles. Of this amount, 219,000 acres is heavily forested. The county is home to 53 lakes and 187 rivers and streams. Our largest river, the Wolf River, is recognized by the National Wild and Scenic River System as one of the most scenic and rugged rivers in the Midwest. The U.S. Census estimate for 2022 places the county population at 4,197. Since Menominee County is so small, our highway department is one of the smallest departments in the state. The department consists of the commissioner, me, a patrol superintendent, my right-hand person, and 7 road maintenance technicians, a mechanic, 1 custodian, and an office manager. In addition to performing road maintenance on county highways, our department contracts with the town of Menominee, the Menominee tribe, and the state of Wisconsin to perform maintenance on their highways. The county owns about 36.51 miles of paved roads. The town owns about 79 miles of road, of which 50.87 miles are paved. Under an intergovernmental agreement with the tribe, the county maintains about 65 miles of roads owned by the tribe, of which 30.5 miles are paved. The state of Wisconsin owns 42.85 miles of state highways running through Menominee County and the Menominee Indian Reservation. All total, the Menominee County Highway Department plows and salts 161 miles of paved roads and sand salts about 63 miles of gravel roads. We are struggling, like many other communities, to limit salt usage. We are thankful for our pristine natural resources, and we are mindful of the fact that the salt we're putting onto our roads and in our ditches eventually winds up in our rivers and streams, and ultimately our drinking water. Our operators know that salt can have a deleterious effect on the aquatic ecosystems. Most of our operators hunt and or fish in or around these same lakes, rivers, and streams, so they don't want to see them harmed. Each year, I remind our operators how much salt and sand salt we used during the previous winter, and I break down the estimated number of gallons of water we potentially contaminated. I also renew my request to have them limit the amount of salt that they spread out on the roads. During the course of each winter, I regularly provide our operators with updates on how much material we used, especially after a major storm event. We also keep track of how much salt each operator uses during every outing. And if we notice a precipitous increase in use, we'll address that with our operators. When I started as a highway commissioner back in 2012, salt only cost us $53.06 a ton. Today it costs us $95.68 a ton. That's a $42.62 increase, or an 80.32% increase over the past 12 years. What makes Menominee County even more unique is the fact that 98.7% of the county's overall land base is held in trust by the federal government for the benefit of the Menominee tribe. That leaves Menominee County with only 1.3% of its land base taxable. In 2024, that tax revenue will only bring in about $2.86 million. For this reason, on top of not wanting to damage our aquatic ecosystems or pollute our water table, we must also be careful not to overspend. Unfortunately, given our limited financial resources, we are not able to invest in the equipment we need to further limit the amount of salt we put out on our roads, such as the purchase of brine-only tanker systems or brine maker equipment. Each of our 8 plow trucks, we only have 8 plow trucks, are fitted with pre-wetting systems. Those pre-wetting systems allow us to pre-treat the salt as it's coming off of the spreader, and it basically prevents the salt from bouncing off onto the shoulder or into the ditch line. Without that type of equipment in place, we look at losing about 25 to 40% of the material that would otherwise just bounce off into the onto the shoulder or into the ditch. We were fortunate to acquire a used 1,000-gallon brine tank insert from Portage County a few years ago, and we finally wetted that tank to a saddle that will allow us to begin anti-icing using a salt brine solution. Our hope is that by pre-treating the roads, we can prevent ice from forming on our road surface or compacted snow from bonding with the road surface. Without anti-icing, we wind up using more salt to dissolve the ice that is bonded to the road surface. We utilize the Maintenance Decision Support System, or MDSS, to help inform our decision-making with respect to snow and ice removal. MDSS is a road forecast web-based application created by the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. The road forecasts through MDSS have gotten better over the past few years, and we find that those forecasts are pretty close to accurate within 12 hours of a pending storm. MDSS also prescribes the quantity of material we should put out on the road surface and the time we should begin our plowing and applying salt, which we relay to our operators. With snow removal, our response time is also critical to limiting the amount of salt we put out on the road surfaces. If we can get on top of that snow before traffic has compacted the snow into ice, we know we have a better chance of limiting our salt usage. Other factors that contribute to a successful outcome include air temperature, road temperature, time of day, amount of traffic, cloud cover, wind, snowfall rate, snowfall duration, operator experience, and equipment performance. Almost no 2 snowfall events are the same. We only run an 18-hour operation, but the last 2 seasons we have experimented with having a few operators perform winter maintenance overnight. They focus on the state highways and county highways, leaving less accumulation for our day crew to deal with when they come in during the early morning hours. Over the past 3 years, we have shifted more to sand salt, especially on our secondary roads. The sand salt contains about 6% salt, and it costs a lot cheaper than the straight salt. It also provides more traction for vehicles, especially when temperatures drop below 15 degrees Fahrenheit. As we move forward, we'll continue to modifying our level of service model. We've been doing that gradually over the past few years, but as salt prices continue to rise, we'll eventually scale back our straight salt usage to priority roads only and leave most of our secondary roads to exclusively sand salt treatment. We may also have to limit our response time. Our efforts to reduce our salt usage are gradually working, but we'd like to push the needle further. With salt prices the way we are, we have no choice but to. In this slide here, you can see a graph of some of our salt and sand salt usage over the past 6 years. And you can see over in the chart, the little bar chart there, you can see that it looks like we're trending down on our salt usage. So that's a good thing. Here's some of my parting thoughts in 2022, 2023. We applied an estimated, and that basically concludes my presentation. I just want to thank everyone for listening, and thank you, Allison, for the invite. I'll take my questions shortly as soon as I exit the slide.
All right. Thank you so much. So it looks like here that we've got a comment from Rick. There might be a slight issue with the streaming though. So I hope that people are still able to hear us. That happened, I think, partway during Jeremy. My apologies here, your presentation. I think the connection's a little low on my end, but hopefully people who are still with us can type some questions into the chat if you have any questions for either Jeremy or Bill. And while you're typing, we're waiting for those questions to come in. I just wanted to say thanks again. And yeah, really impactful to hear your stories, to see those images of people, gathering culturally, right, as well as nutritionally important resources near roadsides, looking at burial grounds, and appreciate, Bill, how you said those are open. You value the sacredness of those spaces for your people and still open them to the public for people to come. And I think, Jeremy, also just really blown away by your words to your staff to look at and consider how much salt is going down and how many gallons of water are being polluted by that each year. I know sometimes when I talk to different shops, people will say it used to be just like a race, like who could empty their truck the fastest, get the most salt out there the fastest, versus considering, yes, we're putting salt down for public safety, and how do we kind of hold that next to the need for long-term safety and health of our water resources. So it looks like we've got a question here from Rick. I don't know if Jeremy hopefully can pop back in, but Rick asked if you've noticed any decrease in wild rice or native fishery habitat potentially attributed to excessive salt use on roadways. I don't know, Bill, if you could speak to that, or Jeremy, now that you're back, have you guys noticed any decrease in wild rice or fishery habitat? I know neither of you are scientists, necessarily out. Okay, never mind. I take that back. Kind of measuring those things, but
I can speak just a little on that. And so traditionally, Lake Winnebago is a great example of how we, with the overabundance of people living in and around, this area, has adversely affected, much of the wild rice habitat on Lake Winnebago. Not only have we increased the depth of water, but we also increased or changed, the way the water quality really is. The continued run, the water that runs into Lake Winnebago has really adversely affected the native rice on that, down to remnants of pockets that are left. And there's a study underway. It's been going on for the last 2 years now. I think it's a 5-year study of reintroduction of rice habitat. But to do that, they have to, make sure that the habitat is viable for rice to be reintroduced on that. And one of the issues they are running into is, in fact, not only high H is a P, I think it's pH, but the salt and all the other chemicals that we find in the water and the turbidity of the water itself, with our use of the water as a recreational lake versus a place to harvest food, it does affect the rice on it adversely. And that's just one small example. Lake Quakin is a good example of how restoration is now taking place there, and they're trying to find and develop ways to combat that process. But salt would probably become one of the major components to address as well.
Yeah, and then salt, it's not just the salt itself. Like, we know that salt causes the release of more phosphorus. Salt, right, is damaging zooplankton populations, and those are food for the fish, even if it's not, gotten to the point where it's directly impacting the fish. So definitely that ecology is very complex. But thank you, Bill, for speaking to that. The next question here, I think this might be maybe more for you, Jeremy. I don't know, from Paul Roth. Let me read this. Do Wisconsin tribes have a say in working with local governments on salt usage policies? I guess he said other than Menominee County. So I guess if a tribe isn't in charge of, the winter maintenance, do those tribes get to communicate with local governments about salt usage?
Well, that's a really good question. I don't know. Obviously, we work hand in hand with the Menominee Indian tribe in many different areas. So I've never had an issue or concern expressed to me by the tribe, but I don't know how the other tribes are dealing with their counties, and if they're able to have a say or a seat at the table and say, this is what we want to see, or I haven't heard anything on that. It's a good question.
I could also see, there are probably a lot of concerns, right, that tribal communities might want to be sharing, and this is just one of a whole host of them. And does it feel like the most pressing at this time? Yeah.
I should mention before we end, one issue tribes deal with is that we're trying to protect cultural resources that are sites that are sensitive to those. But in order to do that, we have to disclose where they are at times, and sometimes this is more of an adverse effect than what we're trying to deal with. So there's this juggling act. You'll see tribes deal not only with our tribal governments, but with our tribal traditional folks. So there's kind of like a happy medium in there that it's very hard to strike. And what happens is we'll deal at a state and the federal government wise, but then a lot of that work falls down into the local municipality. So we create an MOA to protect a length of area there to keep fertilizer off, or keep it kept, the use of chemicals off it there to protect whatever it is running alongside that road, the highway, the utilities and such, right? Well, then one of the issues we have is that the state will recognize it, but then utilities, they just kind of like don't know what's going on, and they continue to spray the herbicides and such too. So, but yeah, so that's always an ongoing battle for tribes. So.
Yeah. So with that, I'm gonna try to move us along here. I just want to say thank you both so much for coming and sharing, and also thank you for being part of the communities of people that have stewarded this land for so many years, so many generations, and continue to think generations beyond. I'm not sure if it's from the Menominee tribe, the idea of like thinking 7 generations. How are we protecting this land for people 7 generations after us? That's definitely something that has resonated with me as I do this work. And I think oftentimes people, my white community, we like to think about, what do we have right now? What do we want right now? We want it at right now, and not thinking kind of long-term about the impacts of those things that we demand from the earth. And I think that this topic is obviously near and dear to my heart, and I just appreciate you both coming and putting some real thought into how it intersects with the work that you do. And so thank you for that, and I look forward to continue to work with both of you and in this world and others. So thanks again.
Well, thank you, Allison. Appreciate it. They say we all have to work on it together, correct? I mean, there's no other planet Earth out there, so we got to make sure we keep taking care of what takes care of us.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeremy.
Hey, thank you.